going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you an updated meta analysis for the June 2019 format. If you guys are wondering why my setup's a little bit different, I'm actually currently in New York visiting my girlfriend. I'll be back by the end of the week to bring you guys the regular content, but for the time being, I want to make sure I brought you guys this meta analysis because a lot went down at the North American World Championship qualifier this past weekend. Not to mention we have the European World Championship qualifier taking place this upcoming weekend. So if you're planning on attending, I wanted to discuss what trends we started to notice, what new techs have emerged, and all the fun stuff that went down. And if you're really looking to satisfy your competitive itch, the next big competitive event will be the Pro Play Tour Games event in Richmond on the weekend of July 13th and 14th. It's a $2,000 prize pool, and it's going to be a good time. I'll be there doing coverage for the live stream for all of you guys to enjoy. But if you're going to be in the area, definitely check it out. Check out the links down in the description and pre-register so you don't miss out. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So shoutouts to Carlancho Store because they're going to be providing a majority of the graphics I'll be using in this video, just because since I don't have my normal setup, it's a lot easier for me to take from theirs, but it pretty much is going to be exactly what I would bring you anyway. So here is the top 64 breakdown of the North American World Championship qualifier, and as we come to expect, we have the top 4 decks doing what they do best. We have Danger Thunder Dragon and Orcas, I believe taking up about a quarter of the representation each at about 16 slots. Then shortly behind we had Salamangreat as well as Skystriker, and then we had a couple decks in that other category. I believe if my memory serves correctly, there was one Mystic Mind Burn deck, there was a Subterra Guru deck, there was a Pendulum deck, there was also a very interesting 60 card Pendulum variant, which we'll cover a little bit later on, and there might have been like 1 or 2 others in that top 64 as well. So what's interesting here is that when you go from the top 64 to the top 32, you notice that the conversion rate for all the top 4 decks is actually relatively stable. I mean, we basically have each of the top 4 taking up about 25% of the top cut representation, going from the top 64 into the top 32, while the roguish deck started to fall off. We did have that 160 card Pendulum list hanging in there, but then when we got to the top 16, we started to see something a little bit interesting, as that is a lot of the Orcas strategies actually started to taper off, and Danger Thunder still began to assert its dominance, proving that apparently North America really likes Thunder, because if you guys remember at the last YCS taking place in Knoxville, Thunder won that event as well. And now here we are a few weeks later at the WCQ, and Thunder managed to take this event as well. Now, one thing to note when going into the European World Championship qualifier by comparison is that Europe is a little bit different in how they approach their metagame. Not to say that Danger Thunder Dragon is a bad deck, but it seems like they tend to favor more control type strategies. For some reason, the big combo decks don't necessarily tend to do as well. Now, by no means does that mean that people aren't going to be playing this deck, nor are they going to be playing Orcas, but at the same time, you might see a lot more Salamangreat and Skystriker. And do keep in mind that when it comes to the overall representation for the North American World Championship qualifier, Salamangreat once again had the highest representation in the over 2,000 players in attendance, and I believe Orcas was actually in second place. So do keep in mind that even though the conversion rate is tending to lean in those favors, Salamangreat and Orcas, and possibly Skystriker, when you're going and looking at it from the European lens, are probably going to be the top 3 decks in terms of highest representation. Now, speaking of Skystriker, one of the biggest takeaways from the entire event was Jesse Cotton's Skystriker list, and the reason for that was that he was playing it in the World's Point playoff, and one of the things that made his deck so special was that he incorporated Utopia Double and Double or Nothing. This is some anime level shit right here, because what he was able to do with this is when he went up against any of his Skystriker mirror matches, he was able to use the Utopia Double to double the attack of his number 39 Utopia, then he could search Double or Nothing, and then he has a 5,000 attack Utopia, which then he can Double or Nothing up to 10,000 attack points, and then if he's attacking into something like an opposing Shizuku, assuming he baited out all of the back row like the Widow Anchors and all that, he could just end the Skystriker mirror match in a single turn, and it only takes 2 level 4s to make, so you can just use something like Shark Cannon to steal your opponent's Ray. It's really not too difficult to get 2 copies of Ray out on your own with stuff like Area Zero, able to special summon another copy of Ray, different things like that. So as long as you was able to get to 2 level 4 monsters, he was able to OTK his opponent in one fell swoop. And this is the reason why he ended up winning the entire event, and it was really awesome to see. This isn't the first time that we've seen this combo. I believe it debuted at either the National in France or possibly even the UK National as well. I saw a couple people playing it, but I think this is the biggest stage that it has gained notoriety. And moving forward, going up against any Skystriker deck, you have to be cognizant of the fact that they could have this combo in their deck, especially if you are playing level 4 monsters in your deck, because thanks to Shark Cannon and Widow Anchor, your opponent's going to be able to steal those monsters so they can make the combo for themselves. And if you have a monster on the field in attack mode, you might just lose the game on the spot. Moving on to Salamangreat though, Salamangreat is pretty standard. One of the things that a lot of the Salamangreat players started doing for this event was just running 2 copies of Abyss Dweller, because Abyss Dweller is really strong in this format, basically destroying like 3/4 of the top decks. The only deck it pretty much doesn't really do a whole lot against is Skystriker, and players were just blind making it going first. And the thing was, sometimes the Dweller gets outed, but if that happened, you could just take control of the board with all your Salamangreat cards, then you could just make a second Dweller and lock your opponent under that, and that was usually enough to seal the game out. And this was a trend we started to see a lot of Salamangreat players taking. You have that one flex spot in your extra deck, so that's not really too much of a surprise. So going forward, if you are going up against a Salamangreat player, be mindful of the fact that they might have 2 Dwellers in their extra deck, so definitely be prepared to see a second one if you can manage to out the first. I did also want to cover Orcas a little bit, because there were so many different variants of Orcas that were running around. I mean, there was like the more traditional build that was kind of just running, you know, the Trick Stars and the Skystrikers, all the different powerful engines, but there was also like a zombie Orcas deck that managed to make the top 64. I thought that was really innovative. I have that profile on my channel actually if you guys want to check that out. There was also an Orcas build that was playing dinosaurs, which is going into stuff like Ibli and like just doing all this crazy stuff, and that was a really neat deck that I definitely think you guys should check out as well. I believe if I don't have it up at the time this video goes up, you should expect to see it a little bit later on. It's not like too different, but just seeing the Orcas engine being taken advantage of in so many different unique ways, I think is really cool. Even though that Orcas is still, you know, one of the most powerful decks, it's the deck that you can kind of do the most with in terms of deck variety and engine selection. I'm also going to quickly touch on the second and first place deck list. The second place deck was Skystrike, and what was really interesting about this deck was the fact that he was main decking 3 copies of Summon Limit and 3 copies of There Can Be Only One. This is a really strong choice because Summon Limit basically bringing all the combo decks to a halt, and There Can Be Only One bringing the more control decks to a halt as well. So that way you can kind of just play that control game that Skystriker loves to play best. And going into game 1, it's even more crucial because if your opponent doesn't have the spell and trap removal in their main deck, it can honestly just be a way to win the game on the spot. And then the first place list was Danger Thunder Dragon, as I mentioned earlier. So now it's won 2 events in a row, and again, may gain some popularity going into the European WCQ. Again, it may depend. I know their meta is different, and they definitely have much more clout in the control decks. However, you may see a rise in the deck, and you definitely need to be prepared for it, especially since it did have some of the most representation, not even going into the top 64, but when the conversion was happening from going into top 64, into top 32, and top 16, etc., etc. So definitely be prepared for this matchup. There's plenty of tools you can have at your arsenal, but definitely beware that Danger Thunder Dragon is on the rise. Now, I do want to talk about some of the more roguish decks that were there. There was the 60-card Pendulum Endymion Zephyr deck, piloted by 3 Stacks. I have this deck profile on my channel, and I'm very grateful that I do, because this was one of the craziest and coolest deck profiles I've ever had the pleasure of recording. You guys should definitely check this out, because this is a very unique list, and this is a very explosive list at that. So definitely check it out. There's also a more traditional Pendulum Magician list that was 40 cards being piloted by Jeremy Mitchell. A lot of you guys may know him as one of the best Pendulum players currently in the game. And again, very insightful information. I will have that link for the deck profile down in the description as well. There's also Guru Control that made the top 64. It's a pretty standard list for the most part, but again, these roguish decks are able to sneak in a top here and there, and they're definitely in attendance at these larger events, so just be mindful. And then there's also the Mystic Mind Burn deck as well. You know, Mystic Mind was kind of in a pretty heavy decline just since everyone was main decking spell and trap removal in the form of Twin Twister, MST, Cosmic Cyclone, different things like that. But now that Mystic Mind Burn has popped its head in the top 64, you have to again just remember that this deck is still a thing, and the fact that it managed to make the top 64, hell, it got second place at Dragon Duels, which is crazy. I mean, this deck is still a very real threat. Not to mention Battles of Legend comes out not too long from now, and even though it's not many tournaments aside from like the Pro Play Tour event going on, Dark Illusion is going to be in that set, which means the deck is going to get even stronger once that set releases. So Mystic Mine is still a very real threat, if not only just in the burn variant, but Skystriker players are playing it. People are side decking it in their combo decks to be able to play under and around hand traps. The card is very, very powerful, and definitely be wary going into any event. And last but not least, I wanted to shout out a couple of decks that managed to make day 2 but didn't end up making the top cut. First off was a true Draco deck that managed to make day 2. Again, Draco was definitely in attendance. I know I played it my very first round, so it was there, and definitely be mindful that true Draco will be running around because it is a pretty solid rogue contender in this current format. There's also a Cyber Dragon that was one win away from making the top 64, my good friend Tamir Brown from Las Vegas. Definitely check out his profile. I've got that on the channel as well. And then there was also a Paleozoic deck that managed to almost make top 64 as well. Very, very solid list. A lot of interesting insight from a Paleozoic player's perspective. And don't you guys forget that not too long ago I mentioned that Paleozoic could be a sleeper in this format. I don't expect it to overtake the format by any stretch of the imagination, but a very solid rogue choice at that. So guys, that's going to go ahead and wrap up the meta analysis. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this overall event. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.